Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. We open with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's ongoing visit to Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with visiting Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. She said the interdependence of the two nations has been growing and they share a wide range of mutual concerns. The Asian powers carefully move closer while China remains in an escalating trade dispute with the United States, Japan's apparent closest ally. Before the discussion, take a look at this.
A cold autumn day, yet with warming bilateral relations. As Abe is the first Japanese prime minister to visit China in 7 years, both sides are seizing the opportunity to discuss a wide range of issues of mutual concern. Chinese President Xi Jinping said bilateral relations have returned to the right track, which the two sides should cherish. He also called for pragmatic cooperation at higher level, saying China's door of opening up will open even wider. The Belt and Road Initiative has offered new platform for deepening cooperation, and China welcomes Japan to participate in China's development in a more active way. While meeting the press after their dialogue, Premier Li Keqiang said both sides agreed a stable and healthy bilateral relationship is not only in line with mutual interests but also beneficial to the region and the world. More than 500 deals have been sealed during Abe's visit, and that includes a currency swap agreement, establishment of marine and air liaison mechanism, and enhancing people-to-people exchanges. With the bilateral ties returning to the normal track, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang also calls on both sides to continue pushing the relationship forward.
We need to apply persistent efforts towards our goals. The same applies to developing China-Japan relations so as to avoid twists and turns. I'm being frank here with our Japanese friends and our journalists because China is willing to move in the same direction with Japan to promote a stable, long-lasting, and healthy relationship.
Prime Minister Abe echoed Li's remarks that China-Japan relations are making progress. Abe says he welcomes a number of Chinese pledges to improve ties and bilateral trade. One such plan is China will consider lifting a ban on some Japanese food imports since Japan's Fukushima nuclear accident in 2011. Abe says he looks forward to working with China to push bilateral relations to a new level.
I'm willing to work with Premier Li Keqiang to vigorously push forward bilateral relations. We've set up a new mechanism to promote cooperation between China and Japan in third-party markets. Over 1,000 business representatives from the two nations gathering and signing multiple cooperation documents is one good example.
Also on Friday, the two sides entered a number of MOUs on issues that include setting up high-level official dialogues, improving senior healthcare, and enhancing stock market cooperation.
For more on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to Beijing, joining us in our Beijing studio, Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies. Good to have you, sir. In Hong Kong, we have Kato Yoshikatsu, an adjunct associate professor at the Asia Global Institute from University of Hong Kong. Welcome as well. Many say, Mr. Rong, very briefly from you first, this can be compared to an ice-breaking trip made by both sides of the leadership in China and Japan back in the 1970s, when the two countries broke up with one another for quite some time. Do you think this can be comparable?
Well, certainly it is a very significant visit because for Japanese Prime Minister Abe, Shinzo Abe, this is the first ever official visit in 7 years. And it was going to, I think, so far, the progress and the agreement that have been signed, and it's fair to say that it would help open up a new era of a relationship between China and Japan. This is significant, but I'm not sure how, because history is changing and the circumstances are different, but certainly this is a very significant visit and very important for the relationship years ahead.
Mr. Yoshikatsu, your thought, significant much or only the beginning?
Of course, this is a very important visit, and because Japan and China have experienced a very difficult time over the last couple of years and decades. So now, we can celebrate jointly 40 anniversary years for the peace and friendship treaties. It's a very good step, and providing a very politically friendship and positive messages to two countries and to public opinions and to businessmen, and this is a very positive step, and it is a very good for the bilateral relationship.
What is bringing Prime Minister Abe to China, Mr. Yoshikatsu? If you think about from Japan's circumstances, what is driving him to come over here?
First of all, because now more than 500 businessmen accompanies Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister. So Shinzo Abe make a great concerns on economy, and now Shinzo Abe points out, we should lift our bilateral relationship to the new era. So this means, we need to improve our economic relationship, and now we are strengthening to the joint cooperation projects in third countries, in the third areas. So I think this is a very good move and improvement for Japan and China and economic relations. It's a very good step.
But what about from China's perspective, Mr. Rong? What is China having in mind when China now agrees to warm up this relationship once again after 7 years?
Well, China has always attached great importance to the relationship with Japan. Very important neighbors for China. Has been such a close relationship in the fields of economy, certainly in culture, and also I think there are some differences and disputes between them. So in the past few years, unfortunately, because of the policies pursued by the Abe administration, particularly on the question of territorial issues, on the history, the relationship suffered a lot to the extent that they are being not able to to carry out the kind of high-level visits like that. It was only this May that the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang made first ever official visit to Japan. So this visit, the exchange of visit of the two prime ministers in 1 year signifies the normality, the return of the normality, normalcy of the relationship, and open up and certainly a new era. But and also during the visit, a lot of agreements have been signed, principles have been reiterated.
Sure.
But more importantly, I think it seems that the two sides agreed to pursue a kind of a new road for development, focusing on more sort of deeper strategic consultation, communication, a wider range of practical cooperation, and more intense intensive people-to-people interactions, and more proactive way to manage their differences, security relationship. And in the meantime, the two sides agreed to continue to honor or to uphold the commitment and the principles that has been enshrined in the treaty of friendship and peace.
Okay, well, both seem to have something to use as reference as to why this thing happened and this visit happened. But one wants to make sure that this is so much closely linked to internal politics in each of the two countries. Also, the outer challenges each of the two countries are facing right now. If you think about it, Mr. Rong, from the Chinese side, frankly speaking, at the very beginning of the ice melting process between China and Japan, it was the time right after the Cultural Revolution. China was on a path to seek for development. And China is having China-Japan relations as one of those steps in order to seek a good neighbor relationship and also to open up its door. It is in the overall development plan about China's future. Compared to that, Mr. Rong, now the China-Japan relations, where is it? Is it as significant as it used to be? Or it is much more about bilateral and bilateral only?
I think the short answer is both. Certainly, it is one of the most important bilateral relationship for China, and it is also, I think, a relationship that have regional and global significance. After all, I think even if you look at the economic front, both China and Japan are the second and third largest economy. And of course, I think the stable and healthy relationship between China and Japan would have means a lot for the two countries themselves, but equally, I found the region and the world at large. But it is important if you take a long perspective. I think China and Japan, the interaction has a long history, thousands of years. And in recent modern times, of course, the relationship had difficulties. The Japanese, aggression of the China causing so many sufferings and atrocities, and it was until 1972 when the process of normalization of the diplomatic relations, and then, of course, 1978, the signing of the Treaty for Peace and Friendship, which I think put the agreements of the joint communique for the bilateral normalization in a legal form.
Those are the timelines. But Mr. Rong, you know very well what I'm trying to ask here. That is whether China is looking now at the relationship between China and Japan in a strategic way, a way that is likely to impact China's future and even development plan, not only in the region, but also worldwide. To what extent is that relation still that important compared to the 1970s, or it is not as relevant as it used to be, Mr. Rong? Because China is different, Japan is different. It's about the second and the third largest economies in the world, rather than the most developed country and some of the least developed countries. And the history has also been a part of it. Meanwhile, the allied relationship between Japan and the United States and the apparent trade war between China and the United States. So how should we compare the significance of China-Japan relationship right now for China compared to, let's just say, 4 decades ago? What exactly is it, Mr. Rong? Briefly.
Certainly, I think that a lot has been changed. In terms of the comparative or relative power between China and Japan. I think China, as we know, that as now taking over Japan in GDP terms.
So what does that mean when it
that
comes
means,
to...
of course, China is becoming more sort of powerful, stronger, and in economic terms, and also I think in the regional and the global stage that China is exercising able to more influence. But I think one thing has not changed, that is the fact that China and Japan are neighbors. So a good neighborly relationship are important for both China and Japan. That's why.
Mr. Yoshikatsu, do you agree with that? Mr. Rong said, now this relationship between these two countries, of course significant. It's the second and third largest economy in the world, but the most important part of it, it's about neighborly relations. Do you agree?
Of course, now we are looking at the United States, Trump's relatively irresponsible policy. Trade policy, economic policy in Asia. So now, in terms of TPP or RCEP or some multilateralism free trade systems, now Japan and China are the second and third largest economy in Asia. We can do a lot. We have to cooperate. We have to work together. And this is an undeniable fact. So, I agree. Japan and China now, we have to work together in economic issue and maybe some security issues like Korean Peninsula issues or some security issues in Asia and how to maintain the stability in Asia. So now I think like Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said, we should lift our bilateral relationship to the new phase. So this means now Japan and China, we can become more parallel, more mutual beneficial relationships, not only economically, but some security terms. So this is going to be more important and strategic bilateral relationship in the world, not only in the region, but in the world. Now looking at Europe, United States, a lot of problems, beyond the region. So I think I basically agree with Mr. Rong said.
But Mr. Yoshikatsu, if I could just push a little bit forward about that, there is competition between the two economies, no doubt, China and Japan's, even though not as fierce as some would say, but certainly there is, because it is, after all, second and third largest economy in the world. Secondly, there is this ally relationship between Japan and the United States. And obviously, between Japan and China is a very different story. So how to see that playing into the overall bilateral relations between these two countries? Certainly, history thing will never be forgotten, right? It will always be a stumbling block from time to time. So do you think the necessity of these two working together between the two countries have been recognized as much bigger than the three possible stumbling blocks that I just mentioned earlier, that the two countries realize that they really have to work together right now? Well, this is going to be only temporary. When the wind is blowing to a certain degree, things will change again.
Yeah. For Japan, of course, how to realize and improve the relation with China is always controversial, because we are allies of the United States. So we need to try to take balance. In one hand, we need to strengthen the alliance with the United States, but at the same time, now looking at Trump's policy in Asia, we need to be responsible for the regional stability and prosperity. So now China is rising up, and now we need to strengthen with the largest trade partner for Japan. So Japan now is somehow upset, because now we are trying to lead the TPP and the regional integration in Asia, but now Trump is relatively irresponsible. So now China is more ambitious and trying to maximize influence in Asia. So now we are trying to take balance. But from Shinzo Abe, it's the longest administration since the World War II. So I think as a Japanese citizen, Shinzo Abe is trying to do something and expand the influence in Asia. So I think this is a good thing for Japan, for China, and for the region. So now we can do something in this region. Yeah.
Now we can do something in this region. Yes. Shinzo Abe first visited Beijing, as we know, 12 years ago, during his first term as prime minister. During the 2006 meeting, China and Japan already signed a communique. They agreed to build a mutually beneficial relationship, increase bilateral dialogue, resolve the East China Sea dispute, and cooperate on regional security. However, Sino-Japanese ties cooled again in the following years. Now, we don't want to mention every details of it in those years. Let's fast forward to 2018. Leaders of Japan and China have signed 500 deals now, worth of a little more than $3.5 billion on projects that include energy, healthcare, finance, automobile. The most important deal is a 3-year currency swap of up to $30 billion to ease bilateral business. Those are beautiful deals, and yet, will history repeat itself, Mr. Rong? I mean, that is just a very legitimate question to be asked. We see the warming up, we see the going down, and it's really going down for quite some time before this bouncing back. But is it going to be short term?
Well, it all depends on, certainly it's a big question, that's an open-ended question. But I think this visit, or the efforts that has been made so far for a kind of new era, I mean, China-Japan relation for a new era, is meant to find the answer to the question you raised. I think the Chinese side, as far as I can see, made it very clear there are several things they have to need to take into account. First of all, these principles and agreements and spirits, if I can say, has to be upheld. The 4 political documents and the 4 principles that have been reached in 2014. And secondly, I think the two sides have to work together to broaden the practical cooperation, so that there be more interdependence, more sort of mutual interest for cooperation. Thirdly, I think it is the two sides has to work together and to find a way to constructively manage their differences and the disputes. This is again equally important. Between neighbors, there are many differences, and between China and Japan too. And last but not least, I think it will promote in a more sort of extensive and forceful way for people-to-people interactions. So during this visit, Prime Minister Abe paid a visit to Peking University,
right,
and have a meeting, have a workshop with students there, and it was agreed that the two governments that next year will be designated as the year for youth exchange, promoting of youth exchange. And it was also reported that the Japanese side has asked to rent a grand panda from China, which was, I think, Japanese so love
Yes.
that. So there are many ways that working together by the two sides, the two governments, to make sure that this time this relationship will certainly on the right track, but it will be steady, healthy, and so that the two sides, the two people would enjoy the benefits of the relationship.
All right, we have 40 seconds left only for you, Mr. Yoshikatsu. The question really is, will the economy and trade ties, as well as the people-to-people relationship, be the be the pillars of the economy and also of the joint cooperation between the two sides? Will they be stable enough?
Yeah, of course, nothing is more important than people-to-people communication. Looking back to the last 10 years, people's trust and communication always matters. So I hope the two politicians from the both sides could provide positively, politically friendship and positive atmosphere for the two countries and for the two societies, for the two public opinions. And then I think I truly believe that economically, or in terms of people communication, we could manage and improve the relationship together.
All
so
right.
I am optimistic for the future of the bilateral relationship.
Well, we all need to be optimistic, and we hope we can optimistically be able to accomplish the mission. Thank you so much, Kato Yoshikatsu, Rong Ying. Really appreciate it, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. Really appreciate it.